The rattling of the stagecoach wheels against the dusty trails of Colorado Territory in 1876 drowned out Zara Hayes's quiet sobs as she clutched her worn leather satchel to her chest. The thin gold band on her finger caught the afternoon sunlight, a painful reminder of all she had lost. 3 months a widow, and already her late husband's family had made it clear she was nothing but a burden they refused to bear. "You'll be fine with your sister in Willow Creek," her brother-in-law had said dismissively as he helped load her single trunk onto the stagecoach. "Thomas provided for you as best he could, but we cannot keep feeding an extra mouth when the farm is struggling." The words still stung. After 5 years of marriage and the devastating loss of her husband to pneumonia, Zara found herself cast out, unwanted. At 26, she was too old to be starting over, or so she had been told repeatedly by her mother-in-law. "Excuse me, madam," a deep voice interrupted her thoughts. "Is this seat taken?" Zara looked up to see a man standing in the doorway of the stagecoach. Tall and broad-shouldered, he had to duck his head to enter. His face was partially obscured by the shadow of his hat, but she could see kind eyes studying her. "No, sir," she replied softly, shifting to make more room. "Please." The man nodded and settled himself across from her. His clothes were dusty from the trail, a worn leather vest over a simple cotton shirt, denim pants, and boots that had clearly seen many miles. A gun belt was fastened securely around his waist, the holster containing what appeared to be a well-maintained Colt revolver. "Yorick Lawson," he introduced himself with the tip of his hat. "Heading to Willow Creek." "Zara Hayes," she responded, her voice barely audible over the rumbling of the coach. Yorick nodded politely and then turned his attention to the passing landscape. Zara was grateful for his lack of prying questions. The last thing she wanted was to explain her circumstances to a stranger. The coach hit a particularly deep rut, causing Zara to lurch forward. Her satchel slipped from her grasp, spilling its contents across the floor. A small leather-bound journal, a handkerchief, and a daguerreotype of her late husband scattered at their feet. "Let me help you with that," Yorick said, leaning forward to collect her belongings. "Thank you," Zara murmured, embarrassed. As he handed back the items, his eyes fell on the photograph. "Your husband?" he asked gently. Zara nodded, taking the daguerreotype and carefully returning it to her satchel. "He passed 3 months ago. I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Hayes." The genuine sympathy in his voice brought fresh tears to her eyes. She blinked them away quickly, not wanting to appear weak. "Thank you, Mr. Lawson." The stagecoach fell into silence again as they continued their journey. Zara found herself stealing glances at her traveling companion. There was something calming about his presence, a steadiness that seemed at odds with the typical drifters and cowboys she had encountered in her life. "First time to Willow Creek?" Yorick asked after some time had passed. "Yes," Zara replied. "My sister lives there with her husband. She hesitated. "Going to stay with them for a while." Yorick nodded, seeming to sense her reluctance to elaborate. "It's a good town, growing fast since the Silver Strike last year, but the people are decent enough." "And you, Mr. Lawson, do you live in Willow Creek?" "I have a ranch about 5 miles outside town," he answered, "just returning from business in Denver." The mention of a ranch piqued Zara's interest despite herself. Before her marriage, she had grown up on a small farm in Missouri. Those had been happier days before her parents died, and she had married Thomas Hayes out of necessity as much as affection. "A cattle ranch?" she asked. "Horses mainly," Yorick replied, a hint of pride entering his voice. "Started with just 4 mares and a stallion 5 years ago. Now I've got one of the finest breeding operations in the territory." Zara found herself genuinely smiling for the first time in months. "My father raised horses when I was a girl. I've always loved them." Yorick's face brightened. "Is that so? Not many women appreciate horseflesh the way a rancher does." "Father taught me everything he knew," Zara said, warming to the subject. "I could tell a good bloodline just by looking at the legs and chest of a yearling by the time I was 12. For the next hour they exchanged stories about horses they had known, breeding techniques, and the challenges of ranching in the West. Zara felt a spark of her old self returning as she spoke of something she truly loved, something that had nothing to do with loss or being unwanted. When the stagecoach finally rolled into Willow Creek just before sunset, Zara felt a pang of regret that the journey was ending. Yorick had been a welcome distraction from her worries about what awaited her at her sister's home. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Mrs. Hayes," Yorick said as he helped her down from the coach. "I hope you find what you're looking for in Willow Creek." "Thank you, Mr. Lawson," she replied, suddenly feeling shy again. "And thank you for the conversation. It helped more than you know." He tipped his hat to her once more before collecting his own bag from the coach. "Perhaps our paths will cross again." Zara watched him walk away, his tall figure soon disappearing among the busy evening crowd on the main street. Then, squaring her shoulders, she turned to look for her sister, Catherine, who had promised to meet her. What she found instead was her brother-in-law, Edward Miller, standing alone with a grim expression on his face. "Edward," Zara greeted him with concern. "Where is Catherine? Is she well?" Edward shifted uncomfortably. "She's fine, just busy with the children. Come, let's get your trunk and head to the house. We have much to discuss." Something in his tone made Zara's stomach tighten with apprehension. The warm feeling she had experienced during her conversation with Yorick Lawson quickly faded as she followed Edward to collect her trunk. The Miller home was a modest two-story structure on the outskirts of town. By the time they arrived, night had fallen, and Zara was exhausted from the journey. Catherine greeted her with a distracted embrace before hurrying back to tend to her crying infant. "You must be hungry," Edward said, gesturing toward the kitchen. "There's some stew left from dinner." "Thank you," Zara replied, though food was the last thing on her mind. "Edward, I sense something is wrong. Please, just tell me." Edward sighed heavily and motioned for her to sit at the kitchen table. "Zara, I need to be direct with you. Catherine and we're struggling. The mercantile isn't doing well with the new competition in town, and with 4 children to feed." Zara's heart sank as she realized where this was heading. "You don't want me here." "It's not that we don't want you," Edward said quickly, though his eyes betrayed him. "It's that we cannot afford another mouth to feed. The money Thomas left you won't last long, and then what?" "I can work," Zara protested. "I can help with the children. Assist in the store." "We've already hired help at the store," Edward interrupted, "and Catherine has her hands full with the children." He hesitated before continuing. "The truth is, Zara, we agreed to take you in temporarily, but we cannot offer you a permanent home." The words struck Zara like physical blows. First Thomas's family, now her own sister. Nowhere to go, no one who wanted her. "I see," she managed to say, fighting to maintain her composure. "How long can I stay?" Edward had the grace to look ashamed. "A month, maybe 2 if things improve with the store." Zara nodded numbly. "I understand. I'll start looking for employment tomorrow." That night, lying in the small guest room that would be hers for such a brief time, Zara allowed her tears to flow freely. What was wrong with her that no one could bear to keep her around? Thomas had loved her, she was certain of that. But even he had left her with so little that she had become a burden to everyone. As she drifted into an uneasy sleep, her mind returned unexpectedly to the kind eyes of Yorick Lawson and the brief reprieve she had found in their conversation. If only all encounters could be so simple, so free of judgment and expectation. Morning came too quickly, and with it the harsh reality of her situation. Zara dressed in one of her 2 serviceable dresses, the black morning dress she had worn yesterday, and a simple blue cotton that had seen better days. Choosing the blue, she pinned her dark blonde hair into a neat bun and headed downstairs. Catherine was already in the kitchen, preparing breakfast for her brood of children, who ranged in age from 10 years to 6 months. "Good morning," Zara greeted her sister. Catherine looked up, dark circles under her eyes. "Good morning. There's coffee on the stove, if you'd like some." Zara poured herself a cup, noting how her sister avoided meeting her gaze. "Catherine, I know the situation. Edward explained last night." Catherine's shoulders slumped. "I'm sorry, Zara. When I wrote to you, things were better. But the new mercantile opened, and we've lost half our customers. Edward is worried we might lose the house." "I don't blame you," Zara said, though the words tasted bitter. "I'll find a position somewhere, perhaps as a housekeeper or a seamstress." "Mrs. Holloway at the hotel might need help," Catherine suggested, clearly relieved that Zara wasn't going to make a scene. "She mentioned needing a maid when I saw her at church last Sunday." Zara nodded. "I'll inquire today." She hesitated before adding, and I'll contribute part of my wages for room and board while I'm here." "That would help," Catherine admitted, finally meeting her eyes. "I truly am sorry, Zara. If circumstances were different—" "I understand," Zara cut her off gently. She couldn't bear to hear more excuses. "I'll go into town after breakfast and start inquiring about positions." The day proved disheartening. Mrs. Holloway at the hotel had already hired someone the previous day. The dressmaker had no need for extra help. And the school had a teacher. By late afternoon, Zara found herself sitting on a bench outside the general store, trying to quell her rising panic. "Mrs. Hayes?" The familiar voice made her look up. Yorick Lawson stood before her, hat in hand, looking genuinely pleased to see her. "Mr. Lawson," she greeted him, quickly wiping away any trace of tears that might have escaped. "What a surprise." "A pleasant one, I hope," he replied with a small smile. "I'm in town for supplies. How are you finding Willow Creek?" Zara hesitated, unwilling to burden this near stranger with her troubles, yet desperate for a friendly ear. "The town seems lovely," she said diplomatically, "though I'm finding it challenging to secure employment." Yorick's expression turned thoughtful. "You're looking for work?" "Yes. It seems my stay with my sister will be shorter than anticipated. Their circumstances are difficult." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "I see. What sort of position were you hoping to find?" "At this point, anything respectable," Zara admitted. "I can cook, clean, sew, mind children, and as I mentioned yesterday, I have experience with horses." Yorick was quiet for a moment, seeming to consider something. "Mrs. Hayes, this may seem forward, but I find myself in need of help at my ranch. My housekeeper, Mrs. Jenkins, is getting on in years and has been asking for assistance. The position would include room and board, of course." Zara stared at him in surprise. "You're offering me employment?" "I am," he confirmed. "It would be primarily housekeeping duties, cooking, cleaning, laundry. But given your knowledge of horses, I wouldn't object if you wish to assist in the stables occasionally." Hope sparked within her, quickly tempered by caution. "It's very kind of you, Mr. Lawson, but—" She trailed off, unsure how to express her concern about propriety. Yorick seemed to read her thoughts. "Mrs. Hayes, I assure you, this is a respectable position. Mrs. Jenkins lives in the main house, and there's a small bedroom off the kitchen that would be yours. My quarters are separate, in the ranch foreman's cabin. Your reputation would be entirely safe." The sincerity in his voice was reassuring. "May I think about it?" "Of course," he said. "I'll be at the Silver Dollar Saloon until about 7 this evening, having dinner. You can let me know your decision there, or, if you prefer, I'll be leaving town first thing tomorrow morning." "Thank you," Zara said, genuine gratitude in her voice. "I'll let you know today, one way or another." Yorick nodded and replaced his hat. "Until then, Mrs. Hayes." As he walked away, Zara found herself studying him more carefully. There was something inherently trustworthy about Yorick Lawson, a steadiness that reminded her of her father. The offer was unexpected, but potentially the solution to her most pressing problem. Back at her sister's house, Zara found Catherine alone, mending clothes by the window. "Any luck?" Catherine asked, looking up from her work. "Perhaps," Zara replied, sitting across from her. "I've been offered a position as a housekeeper at a ranch outside of town." Catherine's eyebrows rose. "Whose ranch?" "Mr. Yorick Lawson's. I met him on the stagecoach yesterday." A look of recognition crossed Catherine's face. "The horse breeder? Edward has mentioned him. They say he runs a respectable operation, though he keeps to himself mostly." "What do you know of him?" Zara pressed. Catherine shrugged. "Not much. He came to Willow Creek about 5 years ago and established his ranch. Unmarried, as far as I know. No scandals attached to his name." She set aside her mending. "Are you considering accepting?" "I am," Zara admitted. "The position includes room and board, and he mentioned that his current housekeeper, Mrs. Jenkins, lives in the main house." "That's reassuring," Catherine said. "It sounds like a decent opportunity, better than you might find elsewhere in town given how things are." The lack of protest from her sister confirmed what Zara already knew. Catherine would be relieved to have her situation resolved so quickly. "I believe I'll accept," Zara decided. It seems the most practical solution. Catherine nodded, a hint of guilt in her expression. When would you start? Tomorrow, I expect. Mr. Lawson is leaving town in the morning. So soon? Catherine asked, though she didn't sound particularly disappointed. Well, you're welcome to visit whenever you have time off. Thank you, Zara replied, knowing such visits would likely be infrequent at best. By 6:30 that evening, Zara had made her way to the Silver Dollar Saloon. She hesitated outside, never having entered such an establishment before. Taking a deep breath, she pushed through the swinging doors. The interior was dimly lit and filled with the sounds of conversation, occasional laughter, and the tinkling of a piano in the corner. Several heads turned as she entered, but most quickly returned to their drinks and discussions. Zara scanned the room and spotted Yorick at a table near the back, a plate of food in front of him. Gathering her courage, she made her way to his table. Mr. Lawson? He looked up, surprise and pleasure crossing his face as he quickly stood. Mrs. Hayes, please, join me. He pulled out a chair for her. Zara sat, acutely aware of being in a saloon, but reassured by Yorick's gentlemanly manners. I've considered your offer, Mr. Lawson, and I would like to accept the position if it's still available. Yorick smiled, the expression warming his entire face. It is, and I'm glad to hear it. When would you be able to start? Tomorrow, if that suits you. Perfect. I plan to leave town around 9 in the morning. Would that give you enough time to say your goodbyes and pack your belongings? Zara nodded. More than enough time. Thank you for this opportunity, Mr. Lawson. I promise I won't disappoint you. I have no concerns on that score, Mrs. Hayes. He hesitated before asking, Would you care for some dinner? The stew here is surprisingly good. Realizing she had barely eaten all day, Zara accepted. As they shared the meal, Yorick told her more about the ranch, the daily routines, the current staff, a ranch hand named Samuel and his wife Betty, who lived in a small cabin on the property, plus 2 younger hands who bunked in the stable, and Mrs. Jenkins, the elderly housekeeper, who had been with him since he established the ranch. Mrs. Jenkins is a fine woman, but the work has become too much for her alone, Yorick explained. She'll be grateful for your help, especially with the laundry and the heavier cleaning. By the time they finished their meal, Zara felt considerably more at ease about her decision. Yorick Lawson seemed honest and straightforward. And the position sounded exactly what she needed a chance to be useful again, to earn her keep. I should return to my sisters, Zara said as they exited the saloon. The night air was cool, stars already visible in the darkening sky. Of course, I'll meet you at the general store at 9 tomorrow morning. My wagon will be easy to spot. It has the Triple L brand painted on the side. Triple L? Lawson's lucky lineage, Yorick explained with a slightly embarrassed smile. Not very imaginative, but it serves its purpose. Zara couldn't help but smile in return. Until tomorrow then, Mr. Lawson. Until tomorrow, Mrs. Hayes. As she walked back to her sister's house, Zara felt a curious mixture of anxiety and hope. Life had dealt her a series of harsh blows, but perhaps this new position was the fresh start she so desperately needed. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Zara packed her meager belongings, the 2 dresses, a nightgown, undergarments, her sewing kit, and the few keepsakes she had managed to hold onto. The daguerreotype of Thomas went into her satchel, along with her journal and a small Bible that had been her mother's. Catherine's goodbye was perfunctory, her attention divided between her children and the day's chores. Edward seemed openly relieved as he helped carry Zara's trunk to the general store, where Yorick waited with his wagon. Mrs. Hayes, Yorick greeted her, taking the trunk from Edward with ease. Right on time. Mr. Miller, Yorick nodded to Edward, who mumbled a hasty farewell before hurrying back toward his store. Your family seems eager to see you settled, Yorick observed quietly as he secured her trunk in the wagon. Zara sighed. I'm afraid I've become something of a burden since my husband's death. His family didn't want me, and it seems my own sister's circumstances don't allow for another mouth to feed. She hadn't meant to be so candid, but something about Yorick Lawson invited honesty. Their loss, Yorick said simply, offering his hand to help her onto the wagon seat. A person with your knowledge and willingness to work is an asset, not a burden. The words, spoken so matter-of-factly, brought a lump to Zara's throat. Thank you for saying that. Yorick settled beside her and took up the reins. I'm just stating the truth as I see it, Mrs. Hayes. The journey to the ranch took nearly 2 hours, giving Zara time to observe the landscape. The terrain gradually changed from the rolling hills surrounding Willow Creek to more open country, dotted with stands of pine and aspen. In the distance, the majestic peaks of the Rockies formed a dramatic backdrop. It's beautiful, Zara remarked, as they crested a hill and the ranch came into view below. The main house was a substantial log structure, larger than she had expected, with a broad porch wrapping around 2 sides. A short distance away stood the barn and stables, several corrals, and what appeared to be a bunkhouse. 2 smaller cabins were visible, one she assumed was Yorick's quarters. The other likely where Samuel and Betty lived. Home sweet home, Yorick said, a note of pride in his voice. Built most of it myself, with Samuel's help. It's impressive, Zara said sincerely. How much land do you have? Just over 500 acres. Not the biggest spread in the territory by any means, but enough for what I need. As they approached the main house, an elderly woman emerged onto the porch, shading her eyes against the midday sun. That's Mrs. Jenkins, Yorick explained. She's been anxious to meet you. He brought the wagon to a halt near the porch steps and jumped down, coming around to help Zara descend. Mrs. Jenkins, this is Mrs. Zara Hayes, our new housekeeper. Mrs. Hayes, Mrs. Abigail Jenkins. Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Jenkins, Zara said, extending her hand. The older woman's grip was surprisingly strong for someone who appeared to be in her 70s. Likewise, Mrs. Hayes, it'll be a blessing to have another pair of hands around here. These men create more work than a body can handle alone. I'm happy to help however I can, Zara assured her. Let me get your trunk, and Mrs. Jenkins can show you to your room, Yorick said, returning to the wagon. The interior of the house was clean and well-maintained, if somewhat Spartan in its furnishings. The main floor consisted of a large kitchen with an adjoining dining area, a comfortable sitting room with a stone fireplace, and a small study that Yorick used for ranch business. The upper floor contained 4 bedrooms, one for Mrs. Jenkins, one that had been designated as Zara's, and 2 that were kept for the rare overnight guest. Your room is through here, Mrs. Jenkins said, leading Zara through the kitchen to a small but pleasant bedroom at the back of the house. It was simply furnished with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, a washstand with basin and pitcher, and a small table with a lamp. A window overlooked a kitchen garden, and beyond it, the stables. It's lovely, Zara said honestly. After the cramped guest room at her sister's house, this space felt like a luxury. I hope you'll be comfortable, Mrs. Jenkins said. Mr. Lawson is a good employer, fair and respectful, never raises his voice, never makes unreasonable demands. I'm grateful for the opportunity, Zara replied. When would you like me to start my duties? Mrs. Jenkins chuckled. Eager, aren't you? Rest today. Get settled in. Tomorrow is soon enough to begin work. Dinner is at 6 sharp, Mr. Lawson, and the hands all eat together in the dining room. I'll call you when it's time. Left alone, Zara unpacked her few belongings, carefully arranging them in the chest of drawers. When she was finished, she sat on the edge of the bed, running her hand over the clean, if somewhat worn, quilt. For the first time since Thomas's death, she felt a glimmer of hope for her future. Here, at least, she would be useful, needed. It wasn't the life she had envisioned for herself, but it was a life nonetheless. The first few days at the Triple L Ranch fell into a comfortable routine. Zara rose early, helped Mrs. Jenkins prepare breakfast for the ranch hands, and then tackled the daily chores, cleaning, laundry, baking bread, mending clothes. Mrs. Jenkins handled most of the cooking, explaining that her joints wouldn't allow for the heavier work anymore. Yorick was often absent during the day, working with the horses or attending to ranch business, but he always returned for the evening meal, which was taken communally in the dining room. Samuel, a gruff but kindly man in his 50s, and the 2 younger hands, Jim and Patrick, clearly respected their employer and treated both Mrs. Jenkins and Zara with courtesy. On her 4th day at the ranch, Zara was hanging laundry when she heard a commotion from the direction of the stables. Curious, she secured the last sheet to the line and made her way toward the sound. In the largest corral, Yorick was working with a magnificent chestnut stallion, moving in a slow circle as the horse pranced nervously at the end of a long lead rope. The animal was clearly high-spirited, tossing its head and occasionally attempting to rear. "Easy, Caesar!" Yorick's voice carried to where Zara stood watching. "Nobody's going to hurt you." There was something mesmerizing about the way man and horse moved together, a dance of wills, with Yorick patiently asserting his authority without ever resorting to force. Zara found herself holding her breath as the stallion gradually calmed, eventually allowing Yorick to approach and run a hand down its gleaming neck. "He's beautiful," she commented when Yorick finally led the horse back to the stable. Yorick looked up, seemingly unsurprised to find her watching. "He is, isn't he? Thoroughbred stock, with a bit of Morgan mixed in. I paid a small fortune for him last month." "Is he for breeding?" Zara asked, moving closer to get a better look at the horse. "That's the plan. He's got excellent bloodline speed and stamina both. Just needs a bit more training before I'll trust him with the mares." Zara studied the stallion's conformation with a practiced eye. Strong chest, good legs, he'll sire some fine foals. Yorick gave her an appraising look. "You really do know horses, don't you?" "My father taught me well," Zara replied with a hint of pride. "He always said a horse's character was as important as its bloodlines." "Your father was a wise man," Yorick said, securing the stallion in his stall. "Would you like to see the rest of the stock? I've got a new filly that was born just last week." The invitation was unexpected, but welcome. "I'd love to, if you're sure I'm not keeping you from your work." "This is my work," Yorick said with a smile, "and sharing it with someone who appreciates good horseflesh is a pleasure, not an imposition." For the next hour, Yorick showed Zara around the stables, introducing her to each of his horses and explaining his breeding program. The new filly was a delicate creature with spindly legs and a curious nature, nuzzling Zara's hand when she offered it. "She likes you," Yorick observed. "The feeling is mutual," Zara replied, gently stroking the filly's soft muzzle. "What will you call her?" "I haven't decided yet." "Any suggestions?" Zara considered the filly's pale golden coat and the small white star on her forehead. "Aurora, perhaps? For the dawn?" Yorick nodded approvingly. "Aurora. It suits her." As they left the stables, Zara felt lighter than she had in months. The simple joy of being around horses again, of having her knowledge valued, was a balm to her wounded spirit. "Thank you for showing me the horses," she said, as they neared the house. "It brought back good memories." "You're welcome any time," Yorick replied. "In fact, if you ever feel inclined to help with them, I wouldn't object. Samuel's wife, Betty, used to assist with the foaling, but her health hasn't been good this past year." "I'd like that," Zara admitted, "though I wouldn't want to neglect my duties to Mrs. Jenkins." "I'm sure we could work something out," Yorick assured her. "Perhaps a few hours in the afternoons, once the household chores are done." The prospect of spending part of each day with the horses was enormously appealing. "Thank you. I'd appreciate that very much." Yorick's smile reached his eyes, crinkling the corners in a way that Zara found unexpectedly charming. "Consider it settled, then. Starting tomorrow, if you wish." That night, as Zara prepared for bed, she found herself humming softly a simple tune her father used to whistle while working with the horses. For the first time since Thomas's death, she felt a sense of purpose, of belonging. The Triple L Ranch was beginning to feel, if not quite like home, then at least like a place where she might eventually find peace. The following weeks established a new rhythm to Zara's life. Mornings were devoted to household duties alongside Mrs. Jenkins, while afternoons found her in the stables or corrals, working with the horses under Yorick's guidance. Her knowledge impressed him, and he quickly came to value her observations and suggestions regarding the animals. "You have a gift," he told her one afternoon, as they watched Aurora frolicking in the small paddock reserved for the youngest foals. "The horses respond to you in a way they don't with most people. They sense intention," Zara explained. "My father always said that a horse can tell if you're afraid or confident, kind or cruel, before you ever lay a hand on them." "Your father sounds like a man I would have enjoyed knowing," Yorick remarked. "You remind me of him sometimes," Zara admitted, then felt her cheeks warm at the personal nature of the observation. Yorick seemed pleased by the comparison. "I'll take that as a compliment." As spring turned to summer, the days grew longer and warmer. Zara found herself looking forward to the afternoons spent with Yorick and the horses. Their conversations ranged widely from practical discussions about ranch management to more personal exchanges about their backgrounds and experiences. She learned that Yorick had come west from Pennsylvania after the war, working as a cowhand until he saved enough to start his own ranch. He had never married, devoted instead to building his business and reputation as a breeder of fine horses. In turn, she shared stories of her childhood in Missouri, her marriage to Thomas, and the devastating impact of his death. Yorick was an attentive listener, offering neither platitudes nor pity, but simple understanding and occasional gentle humor that helped ease the lingering pain of her losses. One evening in late July, after a particularly satisfying day during which Aurora had finally accepted a halter without protest, Yorick invited Zara to join him on the porch after dinner. "The sunset should be spectacular tonight," he explained. "And I've opened a bottle of blackberry wine that Mrs. Jenkins made last summer. I thought you might enjoy a glass." Zara hesitated only briefly before accepting. Over the past months, she had come to trust Yorick implicitly, recognizing in him a fundamental decency that set him apart from many men she had known. They sat in comfortable wooden rocking chairs, watching as the western sky blazed with color, brilliant oranges and reds gradually giving way to deeper purples and blues. The air was fragrant with the scent of pine and the distant aroma of sagebrush. "It's beautiful," Zara murmured, sipping the sweet wine. "I never tire of these sunsets." "Nor do I," Yorick agreed. "It's one of the reasons I chose this particular piece of land. The view changes with the seasons, but it's always worth watching." They fell into a companionable silence as darkness slowly descended and the first stars appeared. In the distance, a coyote called, its lonely cry echoing across the valley. "Mrs. Hayes," Yorick began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Zara, there's something I've been meaning to discuss with you." The use of her first name caught her attention immediately. In all their months of working together, he had never addressed her so informally. "Yes? You've been here almost 4 months now, and in that time, you've become invaluable not just to the household, but to the ranch as a whole." "Thank you," Zara replied, uncertain where this was leading. "I've been happy here." "I'm glad to hear that," Yorick said, "because I'd like to propose a change to our arrangement." Zara's heart sank. Was he about to tell her that her services were no longer required? Had she, once again, become a burden to be shed? Yorick must have read her expression in the fading light, for he quickly added, "Not a reduction in your position, but rather an elevation of it." "I don't understand," Zara admitted. Yorick set aside his wineglass and turned to face her more directly. "Zara, in these past months, I've come to admire you greatly, your knowledge, your work ethic, your kindness, your resilience in the face of hardship. I find myself thinking of you not as an employee, but as—" he hesitated before continuing, "as a treasure I never expected to find." Zara's breath caught in her throat. "Mr. Lawson." "Yorick, please," he interrupted gently. "What I'm trying to say, perhaps not very skillfully, is that I have developed feelings for you that go beyond friendship or professional respect. I find myself wanting to build a future with you at my side, not as my housekeeper, but as my wife." The declaration, so unexpected yet somehow not entirely surprising, left Zara momentarily speechless. In the growing darkness, she could just make out Yorick's expression, earnest, vulnerable, hopeful. "I know this must seem sudden," he continued when she didn't immediately respond. "And I understand if you need time to consider. I don't expect an answer tonight, but I wanted you to know how I feel, and that my intentions are honorable." Zara set her own glass aside, her hands trembling slightly. "Yorick, I'm deeply honored by your proposal, but marriage is a serious commitment, and I'm not sure if I'm ready to love again," he finished for her. "I understand truly. The loss of your husband is still recent, and grief has its own timeline." He reached across the space between their chairs to take one of her hands in his. "I'm not asking you to forget him or to feel for me exactly what you felt for him. I'm asking for a chance to build something new together, a partnership based on mutual respect and affection, which I believe we already share." His words resonated with something deep within Zara, The relationship she had developed with Yorick was indeed founded on respect and growing affection. In his presence, she felt valued, appreciated, never a burden, but always an asset. "May I have some time to think about this?" she asked quietly. "Of course," Yorick replied, squeezing her hand gently before releasing it. "Take all the time you need. My feelings won't change." They sat in silence for a while longer, the night deepening around them, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Zara rose. "Thank you for the wine and for your honesty." "Good night, Yorick." "Good night, Zara," he replied softly. "Sleep well." That night, sleep eluded her, as she considered Yorick's proposal from every angle. Was it too soon after Thomas? Would she be dishonoring her first husband's memory by accepting? Or would Thomas, who had always wanted her happiness above all else, approve of her finding security and companionship with a good man? And what of her own feelings for Yorick? She respected him immensely, enjoyed his company, felt at ease in his presence. There was a physical attraction too, though she had barely allowed herself to acknowledge it until now. But was that enough of a foundation for marriage? By morning, Zara had made her decision. She found Yorick in the stable, brushing down Caesar, who had become considerably more manageable under his patient training. "Good morning," she greeted him, her heart racing with nervousness. Yorick looked up, his expression guarded but hopeful. "Good morning, Zara." "I've been thinking about what you said last night," she began, moving closer. "And?" he prompted when she hesitated. "And I believe that sometimes life offers unexpected second chances," Zara said softly. "My marriage to Thomas was good, if brief. He would not want me to spend the rest of my life alone and unhappy." Yorick set aside the brush and turned to face her fully. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying yes, Yorick. I would be honored to become your wife." The joy that transformed his face was beautiful to behold. In 3 quick strides, he was standing before her, taking both her hands in his. "You've made me the happiest man in Colorado territory." "There are conditions," Zara said, attempting to maintain some semblance of practicality despite the flutter in her chest. "Name them," Yorick replied immediately. "I want to continue working with the horses, not just as a hobby, but as a true partner in the breeding program." "Done," he agreed without hesitation. "Your knowledge is an asset to the ranch. I'd be a fool not to utilize it fully." "And I want a proper courtship before the wedding," Zara continued. "Time for us to know each other not as employer and employee, but as man and woman." Yorick nodded. "That's more than reasonable. How long did you have in mind?" Zara considered. 3 months? That would put the wedding in late October, after the fall roundup. "October it is," Yorick agreed, his thumbs tracing small circles on the backs of her hands. "May I kiss you, Zara?" The request, asked with such respectful earnestness, brought a smile to her lips. "You may." Yorick leaned forward, his lips meeting hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. It was brief, but full of promise, and when they separated, Zara felt a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the summer heat. "I should tell Mrs. Jenkins," she said, a little breathlessly. "She'll need to know about the change in arrangements." Yorick chuckled. "I suspect Mrs. Jenkins has been expecting this announcement for some time. She's remarkably perceptive for a woman her age." As predicted, Mrs. Jenkins received the news with knowing satisfaction rather than surprise. "About time," she declared. "I've been watching you two dance around each other for months. Never seen the boss so attentive to anyone as he is to you, Mrs. Hayes." "You approve, then?" Zara asked, oddly anxious for the older woman's blessing. "Approve? Child, I'm delighted. Mr. Lawson deserves happiness, and so do you. And selfishly, I'm pleased to know the ranch will be in good hands when I'm gone." News of their engagement spread quickly through the small community of the ranch and into Willow Creek beyond. Samuel and Betty offered sincere congratulations, as did the younger hands, though Jim admitted to being heartbroken to lose his chance. With Zara, a teasing comment that made her laugh, and Yorick pretend offense. To Zara's surprise, Catherine and Edward invited them to Sunday dinner when they next went into town. The meal was somewhat strained, with Catherine clearly struggling to reconcile her earlier dismissal of her sister with Zara's new position as the future Mrs. Lawson, owner of one of the most promising ranches in the region. "I'm happy for you," Catherine said as they prepared to leave. "Truly." And I hope you'll forgive us for not being able to help you when you needed it." Zara embraced her sister, finding forgiveness easier now that her own circumstances had so dramatically improved. "There's nothing to forgive. Things have worked out for the best." Riding back to the ranch in Yorick's wagon, Zara reflected on the strange turns her life had taken. 6 months ago, she had been a grieving widow, unwanted and alone. Now she was engaged to a man who valued her for exactly who she was, with a future full of purpose and possibility stretching before her. "Penny for your thoughts," Yorick said, glancing at her as they traveled the familiar road home. "I was just thinking about how quickly life can change," Zara replied, "and how what seems like misfortune can sometimes lead to unexpected blessings." Yorick reached over to take her hand. "You're the blessing in this scenario, Zara. Never doubt that." The courtship period Zara had requested proved to be a joyful time of discovery. Freed from the constraints of their former employer-employee relationship, they explored their compatibility in new ways. Yorick took her on proper outings, picnics by the stream that ran through the property, rides to scenic overlooks in the foothills, and occasional trips into Willow Creek for dinner at the hotel restaurant or to attend social gatherings. They spoke candidly of their hopes for the future children they might have, expansions to the ranch they might undertake, ways they could build on the solid foundation Yorick had established. Zara found herself growing more certain with each passing day that her decision had been the right one. There were moments of doubt, of course, nights when memories of Thomas would surface unexpectedly, bringing tears and a sense of confusion. Was she betraying him by finding happiness with another man? But in the morning light, those doubts would recede, replaced by the certainty that life was meant to be lived fully, not shrouded in perpetual mourning. Yorick was patient during these moments, offering comfort without pressure, understanding without judgment. His steadiness was one of the qualities Zara had come to love most about him, the sense that he would remain constant regardless of circumstances, a rock upon which she could safely build a new life. As October approached, wedding preparations began in earnest. Mrs. Jenkins took charge of organizing the household for the celebration, while Zara worked with the dressmaker in Willow Creek on a wedding gown, not the traditional white, which would have seemed inappropriate for a widow, but a lovely pale blue silk that complemented her eyes and fair coloring. "You'll be the most beautiful bride this territory has ever seen," Yorick declared when she described the dress to him, careful not to reveal too many details. "You're biased," Zara teased, but she was pleased by his enthusiasm. The wedding day dawned clear and crisp, the aspens in the valley a brilliant gold against the deep blue of the October sky. The ceremony was to be held on the ranch, with the local minister coming from Willow Creek to officiate. Guests would include the ranch hands and their families, several of Yorick's business associates and neighbors, and, somewhat surprisingly, Catherine and Edward with their children. Zara prepared in her room, which she would occupy for the last time that night. Tomorrow, she would move into Yorick's cabin, which had been expanded and renovated over the past months to accommodate a wife. Betty helped her dress, arranging her hair with sprigs of late-blooming wildflowers. "You look lovely, Mrs. Hayes," Betty said, stepping back to survey her work. "Mr. Lawson is a fortunate man." "I'm the fortunate one," Zara replied, smoothing the silk of her dress. "To have found such happiness when I least expected it." A knock at the door announced Mrs. Jenkins. "It's time, my dear. Your groom is waiting and looking as nervous as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs." Zara laughed, her own nervousness momentarily forgotten. "Then I shouldn't keep him waiting any longer." The ceremony was held on the porch of the main house, which had been decorated with autumn flowers and ribbons. Yorick stood waiting, dressed in a new suit, his normally unruly hair neatly combed, his face alight with joy as Zara approached. The minister's words were traditional, but the vows Zara and Yorick exchanged were their own promises of partnership, respect, and growing love, acknowledgments of the unexpected journey that had brought them together, and commitments to the future they would build. "I take you, Zara, not as a burden to be borne, but as a treasure to be cherished," Yorick said, his voice steady and sure as he placed a simple gold band on her finger. "All that I am and all that I have, I share with you from this day forward." Zara's response, though spoken through tears of happiness, was equally heartfelt. I take you, Yorick, as my husband and partner, grateful for the second chance at happiness you've given me. I pledge to stand beside you through whatever life brings, valuing each day we're granted together. By the authority vested in me, the minister concluded, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride, Mr. Lawson. The kiss they shared was deeper and more passionate than any they had exchanged during their courtship, a promise of the intimacy to come, and a seal on the vows they had made. When they finally separated, the small gathering erupted in applause and cheers. The celebration that followed was joyful and relaxed, a feast prepared by Mrs. Jenkins and Betty, music provided by one of the ranch hands who played fiddle, and dancing on the packed earth of the yard. As twilight descended, lanterns were lit, casting a golden glow over the festivities. Zara found herself swept from partner to partner, as the traditional dances demanded, but her eyes continually sought out Yorick, who watched her with undisguised adoration. When at last they came together for a waltz, the rightness of being in his arms confirmed everything she had come to believe over the past months. Happy, Mrs. Lawson? Yorick murmured as they moved in perfect synchrony to the music. Very, she replied, savoring the sound of her new name. And you, Mr. Lawson? Happier than I ever thought possible, he assured her, drawing her imperceptibly closer. And impatient for our guests to leave so I can properly begin my life with my wife. Zara felt a blush rise to her cheeks, but there was anticipation rather than apprehension in her response. Patience is a virtue, or so I'm told. One I find increasingly difficult to practice, Yorick admitted with a wry smile. Eventually, the celebration wound down. The local guests departed for their homes, while those from further away were accommodated in the main house and bunkhouse. Catherine embraced Zara before leaving, whispering, I'm truly happy for you, sister. He's a good man. The best, Zara agreed, returning the embrace with genuine warmth. Finally, it was time for the bride and groom to retire to Yorick's now their cabin. Traditionally, there would have been teasing and ribald jokes, but the ranch hands, sensing Yorick's protective attitude toward his new wife, limited themselves to warm wishes and knowing smiles. The cabin was transformed from the bachelor quarters Zara had glimpsed only briefly during her time at the ranch. Now, it boasted curtains at the windows, a colorful quilt on the expanded bed, and feminine touches that spoke of Mrs. Jenkins and Betty's efforts to make it welcoming for the new bride. What do you think? Yorick asked as he closed the door behind them. Will it suit you? Zara turned slowly, taking in the cozy main room with its stone fireplace, the kitchen area with new copper pots hanging from hooks, and through an open door, the bedroom with its large, inviting bed. It's perfect, she said honestly. It feels like home already. Yorick moved to stand behind her, his hands gently resting on her shoulders. That's what I hoped you'd say. I want you to be happy here, Zara. Not just comfortable, but truly happy. She turned to face him, reaching up to touch his cheek. I am happy, Yorick. Happier than I believed possible after Thomas died. You've given me a new life, a new purpose. You've done the same for me, he replied, turning his head to press a kiss to her palm. Before you came, the ranch was just a business successful, yes, but lacking something essential. You brought that missing piece. And what was that? Zara asked. Curious. Heart, Yorick said simply. You reminded me that success isn't measured solely in profit or property, but in the connections we make, the love we share. The words touched Zara deeply. For someone who claims not to be good with words, you express yourself beautifully. Yorick smiled, a hint of mischief in his eyes. Only with you, and only when it matters. His expression grew more serious. I know tonight might be difficult for you in some ways. It's been a long time since you've been with a man, and I want you to know that we can take things as slowly as you need. His consideration brought fresh tears to Zara's eyes. Thank you for understanding, but I don't want to wait. I want to truly be your wife in every way. The kiss that followed was passionate, a meeting of equals who had chosen each other deliberately and with full hearts. As Yorick's hands moved to the buttons at the back of her dress, Zara felt not anxiety, but anticipation, a deep certainty that this night would mark not just the consummation of their marriage, but the true beginning of their life together. Later, as they lay entangled beneath the quilt, Zara's head resting on Yorick's chest where she could hear the steady beat of his heart. She marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. "What are you thinking?" Yorick asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "That 6 months ago, I was considered a burden by everyone who should have cared for me," Zara replied softly. "And now I'm here, with a man who calls me his treasure. Life is strange and wonderful." "Not strange," Yorick corrected gently. "Just right. You were always a treasure, Zara. It just took someone with the sense to recognize it." Zara raised herself on one elbow to look into his face. "I love you, Yorick Lawson." It was the first time she had said the words directly, though they had been implied in 100 actions and exchanges over the past months. Yorick's smile was radiant. "And I love you, Zara Lawson, more than I have words to express." Words became unnecessary as they came together again, sealing their declarations with actions that spoke more eloquently than any language could convey. The years that followed brought changes to the Triple L Ranch, most notably the arrival of children. A son, Thomas Yorick, named for both Zara's first husband and his father, came just over a year after their wedding. A daughter, Elizabeth, followed 2 years later, and another son, William, 2 years after that. The breeding program flourished under their joint management, with Zara's eye for bloodlines complementing Yorick's skill in training. Triple L horses became known throughout the territory and beyond for their quality and temperament, commanding premium prices at the annual Denver horse auction. Mrs. Jenkins remained with them until her peaceful passing in her sleep at the age of 82, by which time Elizabeth was old enough to begin taking on some of the household duties under her mother's guidance. Samuel and Betty also stayed, becoming like family to the Lawson children, who called them Uncle Sam and Aunt Betty. Catherine and Edward's fortunes improved as Willow Creek grew, their mercantile expanding to meet the needs of the increasing population. The sisters' relationship, though never as close as it might have been, remained cordial, with regular visits between the families. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Yorick surprised Zara with a special gift, a gold locket containing miniature portraits of their 3 children on one side and a lock of Aurora's mane on the other, the filly having grown into a magnificent mare who had produced several outstanding foals of her own. "To remind you of all your treasures," Yorick explained as he fastened it around her neck. "As if I could ever forget," Zara replied, leaning into his embrace. "But the greatest treasure is the one I found in you, a man who saw value in me when others saw only burden." "I saw clearly, that's all," Yorick said, kissing her forehead. "And I thank God every day that you had the courage to take a chance on this lonely rancher." "Not lonely anymore," Zara reminded him, gesturing toward their home, where the sounds of their children's laughter could be heard. "No," Yorick agreed, his arm tightening around her waist. "Not lonely at all. Just blessed beyond measure." As they stood together, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson, the same view that had captivated them separately. And then together, over the years, Zara reflected on the strange alchemy of life, how loss and rejection could, in time, transform into the purest kind of joy. From burden to treasure, from grief to love, from isolation to family, her journey had been unexpected, but ultimately perfect in its outcome. The woman who had once been dismissed by her kin had found her true home in the heart of a man who recognized her worth from the very beginning, and in that recognition, both had discovered a love that would sustain them through all the seasons of their lives together.